Eleanor Kosky assumed the winter dawn's chill would numb every emotion except wonder. For 6 consecutive Februaries, she had travelled from her home in Duluth to Hollowbrook, Vermont, to compete in the Frost and Flame Carnival's Ice Sculpting Invitational. Each year, the river town delivered the perfect alchemy of bracing air, cinnamon-spiced crowds, and steady camaraderie among artists hunched over crystal blocks. What Elena did not expect, on the morning this 117th carnival was scheduled to open, was to find squad cars flickering blue against the snow-packed green outside the Civic Center. The announcement came through a bullhorn that sounded far too casual for the gravity of its message. Mayor Iris Beaumont had been kidnapped sometime after her final walkthrough of the Midway at 11:30 p.m. No one had seen or heard a struggle, only her parka abandoned near the bandstand and a trail of size 9 boot prints leading into the municipal garage, where they vanished beside tire tracks. The deputy mayor, Gerald Crane, strode up the makeshift podium and told townspeople that the best thing Hollowbrook could do was carry on with the carnival. "For the mayor," he said, pressing a hand to his tweed-covered heart. The microphone fed back with a weary squeal, and Elena thought she saw faint satisfaction in Crane's narrowing eyes. Elena almost packed her chisels and returned to Duluth. Competitions felt trivial now, yet she noticed the fear tearing through parents' voices while they tried to reassure children the carnival would still glow with lights tonight. Ice, she'd learned, could be medicine for anxiety. Watching a blank, translucent block transform into something graceful reminded people that beauty could survive in bitter conditions. She decided to stay, carving the piece she had sketched back in December, a life-size trumpeter swan arching its neck into a heart. By mid-morning, she had her scaffold erected in Depot Square, music pulsing from speakers buried under snowbanks. Other sculptors sawed, grated, and flamed their slabs. Elena's block stood 10 feet tall, delivered overnight by forklift, edges still misting. She ran gloved fingertips along the face, deciding where feathery ripples would emerge. Ice, she thought, is always a conversation with time. You borrow purity from water and beg winter to prolong the loan. The cold never bothered Elena, but curiosity did. Between passes of her V-chisel, she kept an informal inventory of the crime stories drifting on gusts from passerby. One carnival volunteer claimed the kidnappers had hacked the mayor's phone and sent a cryptic text to her assistant. Others whispered about Samson Mills, the disgruntled snowplow contractor whose municipal contract Beaumont had cancelled last year. Elena filed details away, the way she stored textures of an ice block in her memory to decide which flake to flick next. At noon, police cordoned off the fairway's west end so forensic teams could examine storage sheds and drone cameras buzzed overhead. Still, carnival staff tested light rigs and pumped kettle corn aroma through the frigid air. Elena put headphones on, partly to drown helicopter blades, partly to hold her focus. By 4 o'clock, the swan's wings had emerged like twin sails. She used a blowtorch to raise gloss on the neck, then backed off to study proportions. Perfect, she decided, though the hollow inside the bird's torso, an air pocket nature had left in the harvested river ice, annoyed her slightly. Internal emptiness sometimes stressed external stability, but she could not fix it now without fracturing the belly. A second announcement echoed across Depot Square at dusk. Deputy Mayor Crane reported that the kidnappers had demanded a ransom, but refused to reveal an amount until preliminary demonstrations of good faith were met. "We are evaluating next steps," he concluded, jaw tightening. Elena noticed a tremor in his left hand. She also noted the way carnival goers murmured when he stepped down, as though they collectively disliked something in his carriage. The carnival opened anyway. Strings of Edison bulbs glowed amber along the riverwalk, skating rinks hissed under skates, and Elena's completed swan occupied the center circle. Children posed for photos beside it, while their parents sipped mulled cider from paper cups. Elena remained after hours, smoothing stray ridges, until the night watchman announced a hard freeze alert. She wrapped heating pads around her wrists, sculpting 10 hours straight taxed tendons more than cold, and trudged to her rented room above the bakery. Sleep never came. Every squeak of pipes sounded like rope tightening around a captive. At 3 a.m., Elena rose, craving the crisp logic of her craft, and walked to Depot Square. The night sky flashed with aurora, green curtains rippling. She pulled out her phone to film the display, then instinctively aimed the camera toward the swan. Under shifting colors, the sculpture looked alive, but she frowned. There was a darker shape in its belly, visible only because the torso clouded slightly as the temperature drifted up to 28 degrees. The air pocket must be melting unevenly, she thought, and decided to return at first light. Morning brought calamity. Warm southern air barreled into Vermont, raising temperatures above freezing by 10 o'clock. Elena hustled to the square, heart banging. Her swan remained upright, yet water droplets streaked down its chest, pooling around its base. Something glinted inside the torso cavity. She stepped onto her crate and shone a penlight through the ice. A rectangle, paper? No, cardboard heavier than paper, wedged between 2 layers of translucence. Elena drew breath. Rules barred artists from altering finished sculptures once the public exhibit began, but this wasn't modification for aesthetics. It was an emergency. She called to Officer Payne, who patrolled nearby. When he approached, Eleanor explained what she saw. Payne peered in, squinting. "Looks like garbage frozen inside," he said. "Garbage that's sealed inside a block delivered by the carnival's official supplier?" Elena retorted. Payne radioed his superior. Within 15 minutes, 2 detectives, Rosen and Lynn, surrounded the sculpture, red taping a perimeter. Rosen wanted to chainsaw the swan immediately. Elena winced, protective of her art, but more concerned the vibrations might shred the mysterious insert. She suggested they let nature open the cavity. The rise in temperature would melt a window soon enough. They agreed. A crowd gathered, speculating loudly. Local reporters trained cameras on the evolving drip. Elena stood under the scaffold's shade, arms folded, unwilling to leave. As midday sun softened the ice, a thin panel in the swan's lower breast turned to slush and slid off like the door of a crystal cabinet. Detective Lynn donned nitrile gloves, reached through, and extracted a waterproof pouch. Inside lay a single sheet of vellum, folded twice. Rosen unfolded it. His eyebrows climbed. He signaled Lynn to bag the evidence, then motioned Elena aside. "We have a ransom note," he said. "It's handwritten, signed, and time-stamped." Elena's stomach flipped. Signed by whom? By the organization calling itself Frostkeepers. They demand $100,000 in unmarked bills, placed in a red duffel inside the bandstand tonight at 9. She blinked. Frostkeepers? Never heard of them. "Neither have we," Rosen said. "But the note also details step by step how Mayor Beaumont was lured. They mention using the city's own resources to conceal their instructions, protected inside the swan of the carnival. That's you, Ms. Koski." Her astonishment snapped into indignation. "I never. The ice supplier must have iced the note in before shipping." I didn't see it while rough cutting because the block was opaque. I worked blindly around that hollow. It already existed. Rosen believed her. She could see it. Still, procedures demanded they treat her as material witness. They took a sworn statement, photographed her tools, and finally released her with a brusque apology for the interruption. Eleanor retreated to the festival's hospitality tent, where coffee steamed and feverish gossip overtook conversation. She stirred sugar absent-mindedly, replaying events. Whoever embedded the note knew she would sculpt a swan, as the entry list and design sketches were published weeks earlier. They timed thaw rates precisely so that the note emerged only after the Ransom deadline was broadcast. The entire spectacle ensured maximum publicity, pressure, and chaos. But why pick Elena's sculpture rather than any other contestant's block? She recalled the hollowness that irritated her during shaping. The internal bubble nature had left. Except maybe it wasn't natural. Suppose someone drilled a core in the block, inserted the note, and refroze a plug. With the right equipment, the seam would vanish to an untrained eye. Yet transporting that modified block required cooperation from the festival's logistics crew. Stalk fork drivers, staging foremen, maybe even a town official. Elena pictured Deputy Mayor Crane's tremor. Could he be orchestrating a ransom to sabotage his superior? Classic motive. Power grab. Elena wasn't a detective, but sculptors specialized in negative space. What was absent mattered as much as what remained. She left the tent and walked to the refrigeration yard behind the Civic Center, where surplus blocks nested under tarps and glycol coils. A security guard chewing licorice allowed her through after she flashed her artist badge. She found the foreman, Marty Delgado, calibrating thermostats. Marty treated the ice inventory like wine, labeling each block's harvest date and river source. Elena asked if any blocks had been swapped last minute. Marty rubbed frost off his beard. "One oddity," he admitted. "Early Wednesday we got a call from Deputy Crane himself. Wanted a fresh block added to the roster for a special demonstration piece. We were full up, but Crane insisted, signed an emergency purchase order, and had a driver bring the block directly from his personal business freezer." "Crane owns a freezer?" "Well, his brother does, Crane Cold Storage, up near Exit 9. They store fish and vaccine shipments. It's top grade." Elena's pulse quickened. Which sculptor ended up with that block? "You." Marty scratched his head. "Crane said the guest artist from Duluth deserved premium clarity. We parked it at your station an hour before you arrived." Elena exhaled a plume. The kidnapper had gift-wrapped her a Trojan horse. She thanked Marty and hurried toward the police command trailer. Detectives Rosen and Lynn listened as she outlined the timeline. Rosen's jaw flexed. "We've been suspicious of Crane," he admitted, "but this nails proximity. Still, we need corroboration." Lynn added, "Crane's schedule last night shows him hosting out-of-town donors at the brewery until midnight. If he stashed the mayor earlier, he'd need an accomplice." Elena thought of Samson Mills, the disgruntled snowplow contractor. He had keys to the municipal garage, where the kidnapper's boot prints vanished. Mills owned heavy trucks and, more important, portable coolers large enough to store ice blocks, perfect for transportation without arousing suspicion. Rosen drummed fingers on a map. "We also traced those tire tracks to chains rated for heavy equipment, same as Mills's rigs." "Then set a trap," Elena said. "Let the ransom drop happen. But wire me, not a cop. Crane believes I'm the gullible artist whose block carried his secret. He might approach me to explain things if he feels cornered." Rosen considered. "You'd be in danger." I work with razor-sharp chisels daily, she replied. And my father taught me Krav Maga before I ever held a mallet. She left out that her heart pounded like a timpani at the idea. They wired a miniature transmitter into her scarf. Elena waited near dusk in the warm glow of kettlecorn cauldrons, rehearsing lines she might say. At 8:40 p.m., Deputy Mayor Crane found her sanding an irrelevant scrap of ice behind the exhibit row. His expression feigned paternal concern. "Ms. Koski," he began, "such a tragedy, but your sculpture's role today was fortuitous. The media frenzy might pressure our criminals to release Mayor Beaumont quickly." "I was shocked," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "Strange how that particular block ended up with me." He nodded slowly. "Indeed, fate chooses curious vessels." Eleanor saw a bead of sweat break beneath his grey wool hat despite the 32-degree air. Crane slid hands into coat pockets, careful gesture to conceal trembling. "Listen," he continued, voice lowered. "For the good of this town, it's critical no one interferes with the ransom drop. I'd like you to keep tonight's events discreet. You've done enough." "Of course," Elena said, "but if something happens to Mayor Beaumont—" "It won't," Crane interrupted. "These people are professionals." He studied her eyes as if searching for dissent, then walked toward the bandstand, crunching snow deliberately. His figure merged with maple shadows. Elena relayed everything through her scarf mic. 9 o'clock neared. Police disguised as carnival vendors loitered, while a SWAT unit hid in nearby tunnels carved for the holiday light display. At 9:02, a red duffel appeared at the bandstand, carried by Gerald Crane himself. He placed it on a bench, zipped it halfway, presumably exhibiting cash for watchers. Then he retreated, dialing his phone. 2 minutes later, a snowplow rumble echoed down Birch Street. A truck emblazoned Mills Snow and Sand rolled next to the stage, engine idling. Samson Mills jumped out, grabbed the duffel, tossed it into the cab, and climbed back in. The trap snapped shut. Patrol cars skidded across fresh powder, boxing the truck. Crane pivoted to flee. Elena tripped him with a precise ankle sweep she learned from her father. He fell sputtering curses right into Rosen's handcuffs. Even as Crane was led away, Elena feared the worst. That Mills or an unseen partner had already harmed the mayor. Officers interrogated both men separately at the Civic Center. Mills cracked first. He admitted he and Crane had formed an offshore LLC known as Frost Keepers to siphon municipal funds through phony infrastructure repairs. Mayor Beaumont discovered discrepancies and threatened exposure. Crane panicked, planned the kidnapping to force her resignation, then stage a heroic rescue to gain voters' trust. He lured Beaumont to the municipal garage under pretense of inspecting carnival pyrotechnics, where Mills subdued her with a zip tie and chloroform. They stashed her in an old winter salt cellar at Mills's depot, monitoring her via webcam. Within the hour, a search team located the mayor in the cellar, shivering but alive, wrists bound loosely. Elena stood outside the ambulance as EMTs tucked blankets around Beaumont's shoulders. The mayor's eyes gleamed with exhausted gratitude. "You saved me," she rasped, voice hoarse from cold. Eleanor shook her head. "Ice saved you, or melted ice, technically." Beaumont managed a wry smile. "Then we'll erect a statue in its honor, preferably bronze next time." The carnival resumed the next day, under a banner that read, "Frost and Flame," and "Justice." Tourists queued early to watch Elena's half-melted swan, now enclosed in plexiglass as an unlikely artifact of civic survival. Children pressed mittened hands to the shield, peering at the cavity where the ransom note had slept. Reporters asked Elena how it felt to have her artwork become a forensic exhibit. She replied that every sculpture is temporary. What matters is the memory it leaves behind. On closing night, Mayor Beaumont appeared on stage, arm in sling, and handed Elena the Crystal Chisel Award for Artistic Excellence and Community Valor. Cameras flashed, flurries drifted like confetti. Elena lifted the chisel trophy, but her gaze strayed to the river, where moonlight traced ripples under fractured ice. Water, she mused, stored secrets effortlessly. In solid form it hid a ransom note. In liquid form it could erase footprints or smuggle reflections of crimes committed on shore. Sculptors and detectives both listened to its silence. After speeches, Beaumont joined Elena near a fire barrel. "They told me Crane chose your block," the mayor said. Ironic. He thought he was selecting the perfect hiding place, but he actually picked the one sculptor stubborn enough to keep watch after hours. Eleanor shrugged. "You can't rush a swan, or a conscience." Beaumont laughed, then grew serious. "Hollow Brook owes you an apology for being dragged into this, and a thank you. Would you consider designing a permanent ice museum wing? We're converting the old livery stables. I'd like you curating rotating exhibits, maybe teaching kids." Elena felt warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She pictured apprentices discovering the delicate knot where temperature, timing, and imagination tighten into clear significance. "I'd be honored," she answered. As the final fireworks erupted, luminous blues, whites, and golds, Elena realized that, like ice, tragedy could refract into unexpected rainbows when struck by courageous light. She raised her cup of cider toward the sky, not in toast to villains vanquished, but in gratitude for the fragile, transparent medium that had betrayed them.